The Capital Confidential podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
So the Capital Confidential comment section, is it a cesspool that needs to be wiped from the face of the earth, or is it just a misunderstood society of great debaters?
Yeah, if only the latter. No, I have stopped reading the Capital Confidential comment section.
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election? We will. I'm going to run against him. I wish you would. I wish you would, Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
This is Poozer Politics, and I'm David Lombardo. This episode is a conversation about the evolution of Capital Confidential with Rex Smith, editor of the Times-Union, who has helped shepherd the brand online and into your ears from a print product 20 years ago. The interview, which features a poor recording of my voice, also explores what it means to be a news company with so many different platforms to compete on. This audio has been sitting in my queue for about a month, and I decided to publish it now because of the massive layoffs at the Daily News at the start of the week, which claimed a lot of great reporters, including my friend Glenn Blaine. This entire industry has been in flux for more than a decade, and while it can be fun to chat about the delivery of news, this week was a reminder that the issues we discussed on the podcast have real stakes. Because when newsroom decisions don't pay off, when bottom lines aren't met, there are consequences. With that somber note, enjoy the show.
With me today is Rex Smith, editor of the Times-Union and my boss. And so this is going to be a very, respectful, classic Capital Confidential podcast interview.
This better be good.
Yes, well, I have no one to blame except myself if this isn't a good interview.
Well, we'll
obviously.
say that. Yeah, I agree. It's entirely your fault if it doesn't go well.
That's how it works. And you're joining us today to talk about the history of Capital Confidential, and not the podcast, which has a relatively short and easily told history, but the blog. And we were talking a little bit before we started, and you're telling me that this wasn't always a blog. It started in this, what is this, print you were telling me about?
That old-fashioned thing, ink on crushed trees. Imagine that. Yeah, actually, what's great about Capital Confidential is that you really can see the evolution of American journalism in the history of Capital Confidential, because it has tracked the changes in the industry over more than 20 years now. And about 1996, Jeff Cohen, the editor at the time, and I was the managing editor for News, the number 2 newsroom job, we were talking about what we might do to enhance our coverage. We thought we needed a column that would take us inside, that would give us the not just the fabric of Capital coverage, but the threads of the fabric, some really detailed stuff. And so we thought, let's run this on a Monday. So we're actually writing the column on a Friday. I had written a Friday for Monday column for Newsday for some years, so that we have state content for Monday to start the week, to sort of be prospective on what the legislature would be doing during the session. Let's create this thing and have it be some of these inside stories that will appeal to people who aren't necessarily your general Times-Union reader, but the people in this capital city who really know the inside and care about it.
What was the landscape like then? I mean, when you talk about this, I immediately think, oh, that's Ken Lovett's column for the Daily News.
Yes.
Did something like that exist in other forms for other papers? Was Fred Dicker doing something like
Yes.
that for the Post? Or?
Fred Dicker was, in fact, doing his column in the Post. And so we saw ourselves as needing to go head-to-head with Fred. So I hadn't thought of it quite that way. There was nothing like that in the Daily News, certainly not in the Times, which tends to only do stories when they want to take a step back and
parachute in, too.
Right, exactly.
We're the Times. We're here.
Don't you? And love us. Please love us. Yes. So we thought, yes, we would be an alternative to Fred Dicker's sometimes Problematic reporting.
Okay.
Fred was more a reporter in those days than a commentator, but even so, we thought that his reporting had such a bias to it that we needed to present straightforward reporting, but as inside as we can be. To Fred's great credit, by the way, and this is one of Ken Lovett's great skills these days in Capitol coverage. He's very energetic, and he does his reporting, Ken does now, as Fred did before. There's a lot of Sunday reporting to churn out the Monday column. Most people in the Capitol don't do that. But we were looking to do something that would be useful for our readers. And at the same time, we decided to move the what we called then, we decided to call the Empire State page, to move that to page 3 of the paper, to give it the prominence that we thought it deserved in the state capitol paper. It had been back on page C2, and it just didn't seem to me that our state capitol coverage should be buried inside the Capital Region section. So we put it out to page 3 and decided, let's take that left rail and make that a column. And we came up with the name Capitol Confidential, which honestly, I've sometimes regretted the name choice.
Why? It sounds like one of those 1940s gossip things.
Exactly.
Hush, hush.
That's exactly what we had in mind. That's what we thought it would be like, those 1940s kind of thing. And in those days, the popular visual thing in print was to do some of that old-fashioned stuff that looks. There were a lot more doodads in newspaper design that were reminiscent of that era. Yeah, little things that added life to a page. It was considered kind of a cute thing to do in design, in print design. Now we've gone back to a cleaner, more straightforward look.
Doodad-free, would you say?
More doodad-free, but we had a great artist, Richard Stoddard, who created a Capitol Confidential logo that with one of those 1940s-looking dudes with his ear tilted toward supposedly the storyteller.
With a cigarette in his mouth or no cigarette?
I don't know, but it would be a Richard Stoddard touch if there had been a little tiny cigarette that you really couldn't see without a magnifying glass.
Okay, so who's initially tasked with writing this, and how does it initially get off
Well,
the ground?
Initially had in the Capitol Bureau at that time, state editor at the time was Harvey Lippman, who had been an investigative reporter before he went down to the state, now the late Harvey Lippman. But he had really done some reporting that we thought could ferret things out. So we charged him with doing this. It wasn't really quite his cup of tea. It wasn't the kind of reporting he liked to do. He wanted more long projects. We were looking for condensed reporting that could give us a bunch of things. And eventually, I decided to turn it over to this bright young reporter whom I had found and hired initially as a temp coming out of the Columbia Journalism School. I thought that this temporary reporter who had finally worked into a full-time position on our staff could go down to the Capitol and do this job. And that was a young woman named Liz Benjamin.
And we've never heard from her since. It's so sad.
It's really tragic what's happened to Liz. Kidding, of course. You know, we all admire Liz's reporting and think that she's turned into doing a really valuable job in television. But she created the real sort of feel of Capitol Confidential for us, I think.
So what year does Liz come on the scene?
Right.
And is there an online presence at this point?
Yeah.
Or is this still just a print product?
Actually, I believe that we created the blog version of Capitol Confidential around 1998. That would make sense because TimesUnion.com was one of the early newspaper, well, before we even called it a website. It was more or less an electronic bulletin board, initially branded Electric TU.
Ooh.
Yeah, very cool brand, huh?
Yes.
Electric TU. Capitol Confidential was a part of that. It became a way for us to quickly update people on what was going on. It didn't have much of an audience because people weren't attuned to the idea of looking for news during the day.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, people still believed that what they had to do was look for news when the paper was printed, and we still had the mindset too, well, we'll put little things up there on the blog, but we're going to save our really good work until we publish the paper. And we had the notion that the web could be where we would blow things out and make things long because there were no space limitations on the web. now we better understand that sometimes the web is really good for quick hits, for getting things that people can digest quickly on a single screen. In those days, it still was a secondary item, not as the blog, even once we turned Capital Confidential into not just a print column, but also a blog for the Capital. It was a stepsister. The electronic side of things was not as significant as the print. Along the way, we were influenced somewhat, frankly, by Ben Smith.
Okay.
Ben Smith, now the editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed, took on both a blog for the New York Daily News and a column, a Monday column.
What year? About?
That would have been right in the maybe 2000 or so.
Still the dial-up era.
And it was still, yes, absolutely. There wasn't as much digital going on, but it was pretty clear that Ben got the digital. So we have looked at that kind of thing as being the way that we can deliver news more quickly and in a different way. So really, as the newspaper industry evolved into being more digitally focused, so did Capital Confidential. The AM Roundup as a newsletter in the morning, I think came in, probably about 2004. I think that was, I became the editor in 2002, and I think about that time we started doing the AM Roundup.
And that's a standalone function. I mean, that doesn't appear in print. I mean, there's no
Right.
AM Roundup. There's no collection of links that people can, type into the computer. So
Right.
Was this one of the first areas where the blog was doing something solely, separate from the print product?
Yes, I think it was. And I think the name AM Roundup, by the way, came from Jay Jochnowitz, who is now our Opinion Pages editor. He was then the state editor, and Jay is a farmer, Jay, well, there you go. He's got horses and tractors and stuff out in the hill towns of, one of the hill towns of Albany County. And I think he kind of had in mind that he was kind of a cowboy, so he'd have an AM Roundup, Here you go, partner. So Jay was the guy who really started creating that. One of the other evolutions of the AM Roundup has been, actually it's been an evolution of Capital Confidential overall, both the product that sits on the website and the AM Roundup, is that it tends to focus more on our own original reporting rather than trying to be all things to all people. Our initial design, or our let's say our design in the first decade of this century, about 2004 or 5, our design of Capital Confidential included a blog roll that is a lot of stuff from other blogs from around the state. We ended up deciding, well, that is taking people away from TimesUnion.com. We don't necessarily need to do that. It would be ethically improper for us to cite the other story elsewhere and not link to it. Mm-hmm. But if you link to it, you lose people.
Yeah, you're driving traffic away.
You're driving traffic away. So that's sort of a commercial decision. Let's not do that. And besides, nowadays, what has also changed is the way people are served up their news. Increasingly, social media is the venue, the medium by which news gets to people. And so stories are pushed out individually, and people, therefore, are going to find it one way or another. They don't
curated list for them, essentially, too.
Yeah, that's right. So, and there exists now an aggregation site, Empire Report, which is visually like the Drudge Report, and the man who runs that site has reported that he has about 12 million page views a year. That's not big by our accounting. And the difficulty, it's good, but it's not huge. And so I think that we made the right choice to not make that the lifeblood of Capital Confidential.
So going back to Liz and her bringing this on, her presence with us online, how often was she filing? Was she the only one contributing to the blog? Were other people in the Times-Union Capital office adding things? What was the dynamic like then?
Liz was really the main voice. but we did ask everybody to contribute.
Were people reluctant?
Yeah, because she was the main voice. People have their own priorities, and other reporters.
Get my stuff online. Why? It should be in print.
Yeah, exactly. And watch it. What about my byline? I think there has been a problem of that from all the people who did the blog, and trying to get their colleagues to contribute. We had some really talented reporters doing it. Irene Liu, who then went on to work for the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg in Europe. Aaron Duggan Kramer, who is now the chief of staff for the Manhattan District Attorney. These are reporters who, over the years, have made something out of it. The column in print, meanwhile, changed as well. Eventually, we decided that we would turn the Monday column into a reported column that would be different from Capital Confidential, because Capital Confidential was delivering the news immediately as it happened. And we needed a column that wasn't blurbs and bits, but was instead a little bit more of a thoughtful approach to things. And so that became Jim Odato's column. For about a decade, Jim Odato wrote a Monday column for us in that left column on page A3. That hasn't... Since Jim left the paper a couple of years ago, we haven't created something separate for the Monday state page. And so we need to think about that. And we need to think about what the next evolution of Capital Confidential is. I mean, obviously, this podcast is a part of it. The Times-Union has been slower than other media to get involved in podcast world.
Although, to be fair, I mean, most of that's been on the national level, whereas on the state level, I think there was a young man named Dave Lombardo who launched the Poozer Politics thing, which was really one of the first...
I've heard of him.
Yeah, I mean,
remarkable.
Good guy, kind of weirdo. But for the most part, there hasn't been a lot of state stuff on the podcast form. You have Susan Arbiter's show on the radio, which is then was offered as a podcast, but for the most part, other people have only gotten in the game recently in the last few months, whether it's City and State or it's called the Gotham Gazette.
Right. Actually, and our thought was we don't want to be producing yet another lousy podcast. We thought, let's make this good when we do it instead of having it be second rate.
Doesn't explain this.
No, who can tell? But it lured Lombardo. So what can you do? So this is this is an experiment. Podcasts, although I'm thinking podcasts are going to last for a while. It seems to me that it's a popular enough medium that it's become really a part of the ecosystem of media, hasn't it? Don't you think, Kevin?
And I don't think it's a fad. I mean, I think it's another way of consuming what used to be radio. It's a more convenient way of consuming radio, which was a pretty popular medium for a long time.
So it's appointment radio in the same way that we now do television by appointment too. We're not just sitting there waiting for 7 o'clock on Sunday evenings for Ed Sullivan. I think that we're here. I think that the podcast is a good step. And the question that I have is, as the media media as a plural noun, as the media begin to come together, as the line between what has historically been a print medium and a video medium and a sound medium, as they all kind of start to do what each other has been doing, is the next evolution of Capital Confidential to become a video service? Will we be producing video in the next few years at a rate that makes it a significant part of our signature? We have, again, back and forth, we have been in our approach to video on TimesUnion.com. We're only now beginning to produce more of it. Our audience hasn't demanded it. They haven't thought of us as the place they turn for video.
I think that's it. I think it's, if you don't think of it as the venue, then you're not going to demand it.
Right.
It seems like, we're seeing this on a level with giant mergers of, AT&T and Time Warner, and we're seeing, Disney taking over Fox. It seems like everybody, you need to be a media company that does everything. You're not a newspaper, you're a media company, and all that entails.
Well, and you alluded to something there, too, that is a piece of this, and that is acquiring the capability as opposed to growing it. For example, this podcast happened because the Times-Union hired you, who was producing a podcast. And similarly, even though we are home growing some video now, we are training staff on video production. We're trying to do our best with it. And we do some very good video. And over the years, we have at times produced some beautiful video. We used to do a program called Capital Land Quarterly that in which Will Waldron and I, our photo editor, we would produce a video program for this, looking at the capital region economy. So we can produce good video, but we don't do it regularly. And the question is, should we, as a newspaper, perhaps acquire a video production unit so that it has that immediate expertise and we can launch a better video position so that we are able to really compete. Now think about this. If we had well, that's it. If we had the production capacity of a local television station with the repertorial smarts of the Times-Union newsroom, wouldn't that be powerful? Wouldn't we be able to do some great storytelling? Now, I spent a year as a television reporter producer in the New York metropolitan area.
You are handsome enough to do that.
I thank you, sir. You're very. Give that man a raise, will you? Okay, but I was working for Newsday, as I mentioned. I was a local reporter, and Newsday decided they would do a nightly cable newscast from the newsroom. I was the only reporter who came over. I became the backup anchor and the chief news writer and the guy who went out on the street every day. It was the hardest I've ever worked in my life. And it lost $1 million quickly, and we shut it off. But the point was that we were a newspaper who wanted to do a TV show, and so we basically bought the TV staff from WLIW, the public television station on Long Island, in order to enable us to have that capacity. But these kinds of decisions that you're thinking about how you go about expanding your audience into media where others are dominant are kind of important questions, and that's the kind of thing that I get into now in my current job. One of the things I found as a TV reporter during that year, I thought that I was going to still be a deep reporter, that I was going to still do the same kind of depth reporting that I had done in print, but that I would take the cream of my reporting and turn that into my television work. And you know what? I ended up being just as superficial as any other TV reporter. Yeah. I would get the little bite that I needed, the video clip to cover my 20-second reader, and I was off, and I was on to the next story. So there are some production realities of the different media that influence the way you deliver the news. And the difficulty, of course, is that our audience expects us to be all things for all people. So those are the issues that we're still wrestling with.
So is the through line through all those questions the Capital Confidential brand? I mean, is it, okay, maybe I don't want to do a podcast, I don't know which one to pick, but I know I like the Capital Confidential online platform. I don't know which state TV channel to watch. Well, I know I like the Capital Confidential online program, so it's a trusted medium. I mean, is that what's important here, to have that brand that crosses different platforms?
Yes, the brand has to be solid. If this podcast didn't deliver the kind of inside story that people have come to associate with the Capital Confidential brand, we wouldn't label it Capital Confidential. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind with that CapCon brand now. We now do events at the Hearst Media Center, the big meeting space on our building that carries the Capital Confidential brand, the CapCon breakfast, where we have conversations with newsmakers that are usually moderated by Casey Seiler, who was for many years our state editor and is now in charge of our local news report. That notion is that we still deliver the inside story. That has always been the mission of Capital Confidential. We know we're going for a specialized audience, an audience of people who understand and appreciate how state government and politics works and want to know a little bit more than the average reader. That's what is the CapCon brand, and that's why we're able to extend the brand to first from print into a blog, from a blog into an aggregation newsletter, into a more aggressive blog that's delivered by social media, into a podcast, and into events, and probably next into video.
Well, you mentioned Casey, and as I was a young person interested in state government, I think of the Capital Confidential blog that I was reading then, which was Casey, you had Jimmy, you had Irene, like you mentioned, and I thought that stories would often, or posts, would often reflect the personalities that I was reading, and that they had, a little more pizzazz. Is that part of the appeal? Do you think that there's more of a direct connection between the reporters and their sort of personalities get to shine on this a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. That is true. And I didn't mean to diminish, the contribution of Jimmy Vielkind, now the Politico bureau chief, or Matt Hamilton, to CapCon over the years. But I do think that the voice is important. And Casey was a very important element of that. Casey was our entertainment and arts editor at the Times-Union when I asked him to go down and lead the State Capitol Bureau. I chose him because he understood story. He has this great ironic view of things. He recognizes characters and loves stories that bring out characters. And my God, the New York State Capitol is filled with characters. There are great storylines there. It's not just about policy. It's about who these players are. And I thought that our coverage would be benefited by that kind of an approach. So I do think that voice is important. We let the electronic media that we run under the Times-Union brand have more leeway to put more voice into their work than we do in the print edition. Our audience for the print product is a lingering audience. They've been with us for a long time, and they like that sort of straightforward, traditional approach to journalism. Although, we bust out every now and then and give people something that they wouldn't have read in print 40 years ago. But digitally, we can be bolder, and we like having a little more voice and have it be a little more fun. People understand that. We are looser digitally than we are in print, and that sometimes makes some of our readers uncomfortable. They say you shouldn't be doing this and call yourself Times-Union. But I think it's okay. I think we need to be broad enough at the Times-Union to have many products and many voices.
It's a free product, the blog. It's a free podcast now. Could you ever imagine the blog becoming a paid product?
Yes. We go back and forth on what should be paid and what shouldn't. Right now our approach to our journalism content is that our subscribers have access to everything. And it's actually a very fine-tuned paywall that enables most of the stuff that just draws general traffic,
right,
that draws page views.
It's a smart paywall.
Yeah, it's a smart paywall, and the photo galleries and the breaking news live outside the paywall, and the real journalism lives behind it, so that most of the people who want to read real journalism are willing to pay at least a small amount, and it has so far worked very well. We're just a few months into this. Right now, Capital Confidential lives outside the paywall. I think it's a good question as to whether it should come inside. The traffic is strong enough that there is an argument that it should stay out, but most of the stuff that's in there is for people who really care about what's going on, who care about journalism. So I don't know what that's going to be, but we continue to look at it. And, everything, what I've learned in this business now in recent years is everything evolves. I don't know what's going to come next, and we just have to be comfortable with that.
Well, I think you said it best. # thank God for podcasts. Rex,
There you go.
I really appreciate your time, and
Thank you.
I look forward to talking with you and working with you in the future.
Well, let's hope so. That's great. Thanks.
And that's our show. My thanks to Rex Smith for coming on. Please connect with the show on Twitter at TUCapCon or on our Capital Confidential Facebook page, where we try to host weekly live video updates. So far, we've done 1 week in a row. If you're listening on an Apple device, please leave us a review on iTunes so other gluttons for punishment can find the show. And if you're listening on an Android device, just text a review to your friends. Until next time, podcast adjourned.
just heard. I tried to get you. Ah! This day sucks!